Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
That makes sense. I mean, those stories are grounded in employees' experiences, right? So it's a great transition into the second part that we wanted to talk about. Farhan.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Aileen. As Dr. Rothwell last mentioned, HR has a pivotal role in the employee experience and does have a lot to do with it. And as the world of work is changing, there will be some new challenges. Let's start with Dr. Rothwell. Dr. Rothwell, as employee expectations shift, how can HR can be sure that they are meeting up the needs of a diverse and evolving workforce?
Well, it all begins with effective communication. When I was in the corporate world running recruiting, selection, onboarding, and training in a Fortune 50 multinational company, we used to do focus groups with new hires at the 6-week and the 6-month point. And we wanted to find out what was going well and what was not going so well with their experience with the organization. And of course, management lives in la-la land. They think that all new hires are having a wonderful time joining the company. But then you talk to the new hires and you say, what could we do to improve your feelings about your job, the company, your coworkers, your boss? And sometimes you hear some amazing stories. I'll give you an example. In the focus group, one of them that I ran, we asked employees, what was the biggest challenge you faced on your first day? And one of the workers said, well, I pulled into the many parking lots.
Welcome to HR Talk, Unpacking Trends and Innovations. This is our monthly dive into the evolving world of human resources. In an era where companies are more digital, decentralized, and diverse than ever, HR isn't just about hiring and firing, it's really about forging the future. I am Aileen Zaballero. I am a strong advocate of continuous lifelong learning, and I believe that HR and talent professionals are at the forefront to ensure that employees have the necessary tools and opportunities to succeed in the future. My co-host today is Farhan Sadique, a doctoral candidate from Penn State and this year's recipient of the Emerging Practitioner Award from OD Network. Farhan, you want to share with us a little bit about you and why this topic is important to you?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for hosting this podcast, and thank you for inviting me as well. I think this podcast will get some really valuable information on the field. And as we talk more about the technology and AI and the changes of HR, a lot of people are interested to know what's coming up and what do we know about it. So the future of human resource will be drastically different from its traditional role, influenced by technological advances, evolving workplace, and changing employee expectations. Today's podcast, The Future of Human Resource, Navigating Tomorrow's Talent, we will glimpse into what the future might hold, future might look like, and talk with two esteemed experts in our field. Let us welcome two esteemed speakers who may also serve as podcast host on the later episode. Distinguished Professor, SHRM certified CPLP Fellow, Dr. William Rothwell, and Executive Coach, Organization Development Practitioner, Dr. Behnam Bakhshandeh.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Farhan, for that introduction. So let's talk, and I'm going to ask some real broad questions first. We'll start with you, Dr. Rothwell. You've worked in government and in the private sector for over 25 years and 30 years in academia teaching not only HR professionals, but also talent professionals. So in your vast experience, can you just share with us what are some of the biggest changes that you have seen in the field of HR?
Well, when I started out in the field, a lot of people shied away from human resources because it had a bad reputation. One of the thoughts that I heard from operating managers was that people were put in HR if they couldn't cut line or operating management positions. And that included people close to retirement age who were trying to ease out in low-stress jobs. Today, a lot of people have found that one of the fastest positions that loses their jobs quickly are HR people because they are squeezed between the profit demands coming from senior leaders and the demand for more voice and empowerment from workers from the bottom up. So we call that the squeezed tomato effect. People are squeezed between the two forces of top management wanting to hold down labor costs and workers wanting more say in the decisions affecting them.
Interesting. Dr. Bakhshandeh, as an executive coach who's worked for over 30 years with small, medium, and family-owned businesses, what is the most significant shift that you've observed in HR practices, specifically around coaching and mentoring?
When I hear HR, the reality is not every company's HR have a power to do changes, especially when it comes to small businesses or family-owned businesses, family that is running the business, have an HR to just write the paychecks and enforce the policies. There is no decisions that come from HR, but is in a upper level in terms of annual production or number of the employees in the small businesses or middle-sized businesses. HR start welcoming coaching programs into the system of additional to their abilities or competencies that they are pushing and the scales. Since ATD, Association of Talent Development, in the year 2013, literally add coaching as one of their master's capabilities or competencies and the scales, the interest on coaching as a tool for developing people become more evidence, and HR using them more often.
Yes. That makes sense. Okay, so let's look at this. This podcast is going to specifically focus on the future of human resources. And so we're going to segment it into three main sections. We're going to talk about organizational culture, employee experience, and then also learning and development. And then do at the end a quick dive into a future focused conversation. So let me start about organizational culture. Dr. Behnam, first, let's define what it means by organizational culture, right? How has the definition changed since we now work in a very remote and hybrid space? Does organizational culture look different now than it did before?
Well, in terms of terminology or definition, organization culture definition is not that vary from definition of culture itself. Culture is defined by set of norms, social practices, religious practices, or location, customs, food that make a culture of location, right? Mm-hmm. And then there is a lot of characteristics as a norm that goes with the culture. I'll tell you a story about culture. I born and raised in Iran. I was 29 years old. Long time ago when I came to United States, and I raised in Persian culture, Iranian culture, and I married an American girl, right? And in American culture, telling someone, "Oh, shut up," is an endearing thing, right? You say, "Oh, shut up," is a joke or endearing concept. But because I was living in the United States for a long time, it was okay with me. But in a Persian culture, shut up is one of the highest insults you can tell someone. So here my parents come to my house and my American wife telling me, oh, shut up. Oh, you can see my parents' face. Right? So I explained in their culture, shut up is endearing thing. It's like, what do you call it? Playful thing. So don't take it personally. So organization culture is not different from society's culture in terms of certain practices that company taking on, certain surroundings, certain policies and procedures that create the culture of that organization. When Google or Apple start altering the employment culture and workplace culture, it was the first time ever that a company, for example, brought child care, child support to the organization for employees to bring the children and be professionally taken care of during the work hours, or put a cafeteria, or put exercise machines for employees. That's the culture that these two companies start bringing to work. But HR, recently, in the last 2 or 3 decades, HR department start putting influence on changing cultures, because they realize that 19th century style of management as work harder, work longer, get paid less is not work anymore.
Right.
There is no magic in that culture. Labor wants to work less and get paid more. Management wants to they work more and get paid less, and there is a conflict. So each organization, based on their vision, values, and principles, have a certain culture that they follow, collective norms and customs that the society or organization formed around and follow.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Right. So, it's funny when you think about organizational culture, it used to be a lot more contained within that organization. But because we're working so much more in these hybrid spaces, and even having all these interconnectedness with organizations and companies and all these different partnerships, culture in itself seems to be much more diluted, at least organizational culture. Dr. Rothwell, how can an organization ensure that there's a cohesive culture, or can they, or is there such thing now as a cohesive organizational culture?
Well, the cohesive organizational culture starts with the way people are recruited and onboarded and selected into the organization. And it's a two-way street. We sometimes think of the worker becoming part of this larger organization. But at the same time, the organization changes slightly based on the personality, the beliefs, the behaviors of the individual joining that organization. So on the one hand, we talk about enculturation of the worker, but we also talk about personalization of the organization, meaning that the addition of a new person changes the group or team they are part of. It changes the department they're part of, the division they're part of. And some people have more impact on that change of the organization than others. We can think what happened to Apple when Steve Jobs joined as CEO. There was a dramatic change. And the same thing can happen even in lower levels with individuals who have very strong personalities. They can affect the people around them, their whole team, their whole department, the whole organization can be altered by. So one person can make a difference.
There's something I want to add to what Dr. Rothwell said about new person coming, right?
Right.
Imagine a river. So you see a river sometimes coming very fast. You see the water is fast. imagine an organization which have that culture of velocity and fast performance and fast productivity compared with the culture that river is smoother, goes slower.
Right.
Now, if somebody who's a swimmer, even experienced swimmer, who used to swim on that smooth, relaxed river run, come and jump on the high velocity river, what would happen to that person? Most probably would be washed by the speed and force of the river, called the management, the norm, the style, right?
Right. Right.
But somebody go from that high river swimmer to a slower, then they suffer. I saw people, like you said, wow, everything is so slow here. I can't work here. I'm suffocating. It's a job of HR to understand the norm, really study it and know it. So as Dr. Rothwell said, when we go onboarding, if we are familiar with our culture, we can prepare the new employee to what are you about to jump in. Are you jumping to this rush going river, or you jump into this slow, smooth river? That would prepare them to not to fail. That is the future of HR, to understand, especially when you adding hybrid employment,
Right.
which is somebody walking off that rushing river and coming home behind their kitchen counter, and they work. Suddenly they're in that smoother, relaxed river. But the company wants you to swim in that high speed river. What's going to happen?
Right.
That needs certain training and development and molding behaviors and attitude and mindset that HR job is to design and implement.
Well, let me follow up then with the question, as you're talking about this organizational culture and how fast it can actually be, and how easily a new employee or even an existing employee can get swept up.
Yeah.
How do you foster that inclusiveness? How do you ensure that people who are working completely in a different space, not in the same building or same environment, how do you ensure that they are part of that culture or even understand that culture?
I would start from inclusivity comes from organizations, management system interest on inclusivity and understanding and teaching, understanding concept and honoring people's different speed, honoring people's diversity on learning. Imagine you working in a company with a different culture that don't have understanding of you.
Right. Yeah.
Like for American culture, anybody from Middle East or Arab. But in Middle East, there are so many different cultures. There are Israelis, there are Iranian, there are, even in Arabs, there are Egyptian, there are Kuwaitis, there are Iraqis, there are so many different cultures.
Right.
It's easier to call everybody one thing and get over with it.
Right.
However, my point was HR have to be sensitive to different cultures learning, different cultures understanding. So it's not just go do this.
I think the temptation of managers is to focus on getting the work tasks accomplished. And they
Right.
often forget that an important part of the new hire's experience is learning the other people in the organization. And in fact, research indicates that if those ties are weak, the worker doesn't establish good relationships, then they become turnover statistics.
Right.
They're much more likely to jump ship because they have no friends in that organization. So for that reason, a lot of organizations will establish onboarding programs that are really on two wavelengths. They have one person, maybe the manager, the supervisor, or an experienced coworker, who takes on the responsibility for training the new hire. But there's a second person, a peer mentor, whose job is to make sure that the new hire is invited over to people's homes for dinner, invited out for beer on the weekend, like Friday night, if the work group goes out to unwind. They make people feel welcome in the organization. So we have to do both in order to get people to become fully enculturated in the organization. We have to be careful too, because management tends to assume that everything that happens is wonderful. But it's the stories we hear told about the organization that shapes our understanding of the corporate culture. Even rumors or gossip will shape our understanding. For example, if a new hire says, my boss is so-and-so, and another employee says, oh, I've got real gossip to tell you about that person, then that starts to shape the understanding of the new hire about the corporate culture in which he or she is part. And, it doesn't matter if it's true or false, it's the story that is key to shaping the understanding of what that corporate culture is like. So management puts people through a corporate culture seminar, trying to indoctrinate them in some wish list of what we wish our corporate culture was. But at the same time, the workers hearing these horror stories from their coworkers about the awful things that have happened to them in the organization. So which one do you think has the most impact in the new hire's understanding of that corporate culture? It's the terrible stories, of course. Of course, not all stories are terrible, but you get my point. Sometimes the people who are the most aggressive to talk to new hires are the people who have attitude problems. They hate their boss, they hate their coworkers, they hate their customers, and they go out of their way to try to shape the understanding of a new hire about the nature of the organization and the people in it.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
That makes sense. I mean, those stories are grounded in employees' experiences, right? So it's a great transition into the second part that we wanted to talk about. Farhan?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Aileen. As Dr. Rothwell last mentioned, HR has a pivotal role in the employee experience and does have a lot to do with it. And as the world of work is changing, there will be some new challenges. Let's start with Dr. Rothwell. Dr. Rothwell, as employee expectations shift, how can HR can be sure that they are meeting up the needs of a diverse and evolving workforce?
Well, it all begins with effective communication. When I was in the corporate world running recruiting, selection, onboarding, and training in a Fortune 50 multinational company, we used to do focus groups with new hires at the 6-week and the 6-month point. And we wanted to find out what was going well and what was not going so well with their experience with the organization. And of course, management lives in la-la land. They think that all new hires are having a wonderful time joining the company. But then you talk to the new hires and you say, what could we do to improve your feelings about your job, the company, your coworkers, your boss? And sometimes you hear some amazing stories. I'll give you an example. In the focus group, one of them that I ran, we asked employees, what was the biggest challenge you faced on your first day? And one of the workers said, well, I pulled into the many parking lots outside the company headquarters, and they all had big signs that said that if you don't have a company sticker, your car will be immediately towed at your expense. And the worker was brand new, and he or she didn't have a chance to get the sticker, which they got when they came through their first day orientation. So the worker parked at a meter outside the company and then accumulated a dozen tickets during the workday.
Oh, no.
And the company didn't know that this was going on. The worker couldn't get time to go out to feed the meter, so the company ended up costing them a lot of money. Well, that obviously would sour anybody on that company experience. So after that, HR started FedExing the parking sticker to new hires before they even arrived on the first day, and gave them a note and said, put this on your cars and ignore the signs that say you'll be towed, because the sticker will protect you. So by asking employees about their experience, we were able to avoid some of the common problems. We also interviewed our supervisors about some of the problems they experienced with new hires. And they shared with us things like ghosting of employees, where the worker doesn't show up on the first day and the supervisor says, where is the person? And it turned out the new hire didn't know how to call in sick on their first day, so they didn't call anybody. That's an employee ghosting experience. So the way we avoided that problem was we FedExed them the name and phone number of their supervisor before their first day. So a goal is to anticipate employee needs before the employee even knows that they have that need, in order to avoid some of the problems that can sour even a nice employee on the worker experience in that organization. So we made a real effort to do that, and it did have an impact on our turnover rates. That we studied that. We took a baseline before we implemented the changes, and then we studied the results, and the turnover rates dramatically dropped as a result of our efforts to anticipate what kind of problems people were facing early in their work experience with the company.
Very interesting. So anticipating the employee needs is a great answer. But what do you think about the global events such as COVID influencing the expectations and the needs, and how HR managers can better handle the situation?
Well, I think COVID reinforced something that has always been true, which is HR bears a responsibility around safety and health in the workplace. And historically, manufacturing companies have been more serious about focusing on that, perhaps, than service firms. They used to joke in my company, we were an insurance company, and we were asked to develop a list of hazardous substances. And I was given that chore, and I said, we don't have any hazardous substances. This is an insurance company. They said, yes, you do have hazardous substances. Water in the toilet is a hazardous substance because people could drown in it. I'm not kidding you. That's what the government said. Or the ink in the photocopy machine could cause rashes on employees. But because of COVID, HR was tasked, even in service firms, to take the role of health and safety a lot more seriously. Like at Disney, they started to clean restrooms every 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
So that employees and customers wouldn't get sick while they were in a theme park. So that's an HR role, and it requires proactive thinking on the part of HR people. How do we keep people healthy? How do we keep people safe? Not just customers, but workers too, because we depend on them to serve our customers.
Excellent. Let's shift to the training and development part. Dr. Behnam, why is employee training and development critical in the current business environment?
I'll tell you a story. which is make a lot of sense for people who run businesses or use training and development, right? It was a Thanksgiving, like it's coming, right? Thanksgiving. And there's 4 generations family get together. There's a grandmother, there's a grandmother, there's a daughter, and there's a granddaughter. So the kid watching her mother grab the big ham, cut both ends of the ham, and put it in the oven. And the kid said, Mama, why you cut both sides of the ham? And the mama think, I don't know. My mother always did that. Let's go ask my grandmother. Grandmother, why you always cut both ends of the ham before you put it in the oven? She said, I don't know. My mother used to do that. They went to grandmother, grandma. Why you always cut the both end of the oven? Said the oven was too small. So at the time, 70 years ago, the oven was small.
Right.
Today's oven, you can put 2 ham and a turkey and you're okay. So what does it mean? A lot of companies keep repeating what they know how to.
Mhm.
And when you talk to them, they say, well, we always did it that way. Critical position of training and development, right? Time has changed. Market has changed. Globalization pushing us, right? Fair competition between countries outside United States competing with United States, right? Older generation, baby boomers, or generation after that, they are not interested to soft skills. What do you mean I have to be nice? What do you mean I have to be polite? What do you mean? Get the job done. So new generation coming to, suddenly the nature of training and development changed. Before, when you hear training and development, you were hearing hard scale, automatically thinking, oh, they teach us welding, machinery, accounting, bookkeeping. This day and time, right now, I'm in the process of writing a book on a skills gap on soft skills, on 4 C's scale, critical thinking, communication, creativity, collaboration. That is what's missing in today's market, in today's organization. So yes, it is critical for new employees learn about how to use soft skill. Some people call it people skill, but it's much more than soft skill or people skill, because it really is a foundation of well-being of employment in that organization. It's not one size fits all. Depend to the culture of organization. The training and development approach has to be designed to fit in what is missing. Not every organization missing in communication, but they might missing in creativity. Not every organization have a lack of collaboration, but they have a lack of critical thinking or customer service. Oh dear, these days and time, you talk to 10 people, regular people, your friends and family, 9 of them complaining about call some companies, and they had a horrible customer service experience. So again, depend to the need of organization, which is come from diagnosis and analysis and writing a report, going through the entire OD system and finding what is missing, then designing training and development either from internal agent or getting the external consultant to come and train people.
Great. So how do you think HR should play a role in that training and development, minimizing the skill gaps and ensuring employees are prepared for the job for tomorrow?
Well, I think HR have to really face the changing the nature of HR, the way that older systems meant HR to be. Tell people what to do. Give them the handouts. This is policies. This is procedures. You have to do this and handle the accounting or bookkeeping or payroll or vacation and stuff. That is what I fall in love with HRD, Human Resources Development. And I always tell organizations, create a little sister under your HR called HRD. Yes, HR would do what is traditional HR does, but then have a person in charge of HRD, person with the experience, a doctoral of OD, doctoral of workforce education, somebody with masters of organization development and change, somebody who know the need for new way approach to training and development and new culture. So this might be the message to higher manager, executives, the C-suite, that you need to face the nature of HR is changed. Not is changing, is changed. And if you don't face the change, change will face you.
Right, and we do see a lot of changes in the workplace with the technology and artificial intelligence.
Right.
So what is the biggest challenge you think integrating coaching into this tech-driven workplace?
Well, when it comes to coaching, I noticed a lot of majority of people have lack of understanding of themselves. It means the absence of emotional intelligence, EI, the absence of self-awareness. Why do I think this way? Why do I want to do it this way? Why I don't care what other people say? Lack of self-regulations, inappropriate behavior, inappropriate comments that really cause a lot of turmoil for HR, right? Then relationship management. How do you understand interpersonal relationship? How do you understand intrapersonal relationship skills? Then social awareness, which is so missing deeply in the culture of country. So I would say from the channel of coaching, bringing emotional intelligence is one of the essential skills from top management all the way to line managers to get some mid-range competencies, understanding of self-awareness. Because if someone understands their own mindset, then they can appreciate and have an empathy for other people's mindset.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great point, I think. Let's move into the discussion for the future, because we hear a lot of people are asking the same questions. What do you believe will be the most significant challenge? We can move to Dr. Rothwell if you want to reflect some answer to that. Like, what would be the most significant challenge specifically for the HR in the next decade?
Well, I think we're undergoing changes with workers, work, the workplace, and the work environment. The work environment means the world outside of our organization and the impact that world can have on the inside of the organization. And then the workplace refers to where do people do the work? Do they do it remotely? Do they do it in a central location? Do they do it from a Starbucks or the back of an automobile? How do they do their jobs? Well, it's what we refer to as the workplace. The nature of work itself is changing. We know that because of artificial intelligence and robots being introduced in the workplace in the near term, that this is requiring workers to reskill faster, upskill, in order to keep jobs or at least keep the career they're in. The old rubric, the old rule of thumb was the average person would have 2 or 3 jobs in their lifetime. Today, we say the average person will have 4 to 5 careers in their lifetime, which suggests an ongoing cycle where people have to work and then train and retrain, work and then retrain, work and retrain, and that becomes an ongoing cycle. to deal with the rapid changes that the world is challenging all of us with, employers as well as individuals. So I think the future of HR is taking the lead on the human side of the enterprise, which I think, frankly speaking, has been much neglected globally.
Right.
Traditionally, managers have been much more interested in the financial side and the marketing side, and sometimes that's emphasized to the exclusion of the human side and even the operations or manufacturing side of the organization. So I think the future is all about HR because most of the challenges employers face today center around human beings. Difficulty recruiting good people or any people, the ability to select in a way that will include inclusive choices and diversity, ability to onboard effectively in order to keep good talent, the need for the organization to supply training to keep people's skills up to date and help qualify them for either new careers or higher level responsibility, and then effective methods of helping people off board when the time comes, when they reach retirement age or when they quit the organization, that it isn't a matter of just waving goodbye to people, but maybe finding ways to keep in touch with them long term, because maybe they're leaving the company today, but they might want to come back tomorrow. So what then? How have we kept in touch with them? What do we know about the skills that they've acquired since they left the organization? So I think HR has a lot of new challenges because of the way the world has changed in the last few years and the way we expect it to change over the next 5, 10, 20, 25 years.
Great. We just want to know briefly, as both of you are training a lot of HR professionals for years, even you're training the trainers and the professionals themselves, how you are preparing them for the best future, or what's the change that you want to see in them as the future shifts?
Invest on your HR department by having HRD division. That's one thing. And then invest on training and development, unconventional training and development. What do I say? Conventional? Emotional intelligence training, 4 C's scales trainings, mindfulness training, self-awareness training. These are the things that people pay attention these days. Even the younger generation that come to employment and labor market, they have a high understanding of these definitions. They know what emotional intelligence is. They know what self-awareness is. Maybe they're not trained on it to become somebody who can distinguish it and apply it while they're working with other people. But they understand the concept. That the whole concept of manager as coach is something that Dr. Rothwell and I wrote about and we promote. Like in the companies, how about you developing your change agents as manager as coach? You already have the manager, teaching them on coaching, at least at the basic level of understanding, even directive coaching, and let the whole thing grow. Right. But that comes from company have a vision for it. Without that vision, it's not going to happen.
So I know Dr. Rothwell talks a lot about succession planning. Dr. Rothwell, what do you think should be the shift in the HR as the workplace is shifting?
Well, some people believe that the movement in HR should be away from the compliance mentality, where HR's focus is on avoiding risks like breaking government laws or city ordinances or getting into trouble with labor unions, the HR has traditionally been the risk aversion police, trying to keep us out of trouble. But that really doesn't grow productivity. It does not create a positive employment brand. It does not lead to an organization where people want to work to their peak. And in order to do that, we have to think of HR's role as more than just compliance. It's about unleashing human potential. So that's pretty important. But I would add that I was once asked by a famous newspaper, I won't drop their name, about the competencies or the skills that HR people need. And I said at the base, it's all based on an understanding of labor law. But a lot of HR people have no understanding of labor law. They've had no coursework in it. They've not read anything about it, and they depend on their company legal counsel, which is often a big mistake because lawyers specialize and corporate attorneys don't know very much about employment law. So HR people should know of the basic employment laws of the country of which they're part. In the US, that's very complicated because we have federal law, we have every one of the 50 states has laws, every one of the big cities like New York and LA have their own labor codes and ordinances, and it's HR's job to make sure our company stays out of trouble. But more than that, HR has to be equipped to give managers advice about the best way to deal with the challenges we face with human beings in the workplace. And sometimes HR people lack the self-esteem to be just as assertive with operating managers as those operating managers are with HR. So we need to learn how to be as assertive as other managers are. So those are just a couple of things I would say. Every day, the courts hand down rulings at the federal level, at the state government level, at the local level, and HR has to keep track of all those because they may affect the employment relationship with our employees. And if you're a global company, then you really have a challenge.
Right.
For example, in China, they have 4 different labor systems, 4 different sets of labor laws, depending on the type of company you are. If you're a joint venture, if you're government owned, if you're a multinational, etc., there are different labor laws that affect your business. So it can get very complicated.
Right. Well, we're approaching the end of this. You both have shared some really interesting points and stories and talking about HR as a whole. And this goal of this podcast is to really dissect some of these emerging trends. So in part of our wrap-up discussion, we want to kind of focus on the HR professional themselves. So for the both of you, what are some, based on your experience, your expertise, what are some advice that you can give to an HR professional who is working in this dynamic, changing, technology-driven environment? What advice would you give them? What books or resources or even thought leaders that you think that they should listen to besides yourselves? What do you think they should listen to help them prepare for the future?
Well, from my side, I would tell them grow with times. Learn about everything that you want to teach your workforce. Put yourself or learn more about emotional intelligence yourself. Learn more about self-awareness and mindfulness yourself. Then you build more appreciation for what you're about to teach them. And then, I really am a big advocate of SHRM, the Society of Human Resources Professional Managers, that SHRM have a lot of great articles there for them to read. The thought leaders of HR is so many that I cannot mention just 1 or 2, but I can mention these names: Sir John Whitmore, that published I cannot say with certainty, very first coaching book, but the coaching books that published 1992 and then 2007, then 2011, about the whole foundation of organization and coaching and how it could be used. And that's that. That would, I would say, read more, understand yourself more, then you can teach other people.
Great.
I think HR competence is in a series of stair steps. And at the lowest level, you have familiarity with your national labor laws and employment laws. And that's the basis. And then the next step up is familiarity with the job that you've been tasked to do within HR. Like if you were hired to be a recruiter, you have to know the work of a recruiter. But then the next step above that is familiarity with all the components of HR. You at least have some understanding of how your job area, recruiting in my example, fits in with all the other components of HR, how it relates to learning and development or talent development, how it relates to workforce planning, how it relates to compensation and benefits, employee relations, and so forth. Then the step above that is familiarity with your company's business and industry. And what are the problems your employees and your managers are facing, particularly on the human side of the enterprise? And then above that is you take everything from below and you raise it up to the point of how can you as an HR person, based on all of your knowledge of labor law, of your current job, of all of HR, of the business and industry, how can you offer good advice to managers and workers about how to improve the human condition in the organization based on the knowledge you've gained in those other areas? And it all boils down to how can you provide a value added? And often, if we get a degree in HR, we know one of those levels. If we do our due diligence, getting familiar with the company and the managers and the workers, we've got that level covered, but it is a continuing challenge to work on all of those areas because all of them are rapidly changing.
Right. Well, this is a wrap. Thank you, Dr. Rothwell and Dr. Behnam, for adding value to our podcast. This first podcast, The Future of Human Resources. There's so many more topics that we're going to want to talk about in these podcasts. There's the gig economy, mental health in the workplace, the role of HR in corporate responsibility. And then I think one important one is to do is AI in HR and the laws and regulations that HR professionals need to know. But next month, we're going to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and strategies for creating genuinely inclusive workplaces and why it's good for business. I want to thank Farhan for being my co-host, and for Dr. Rothwell and for Behnam for being with us. And that's a wrap on HR Talk, Unpacking Trends and Talent Innovations. Stay curious, stay innovative, and we'll catch you on our next episode. Thank you.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.